Hello, everybody. So I will talk a little bit about what we have done in Brazil. We have also Francis Rosa from Brazil doing his PhD on the Cerrado and Atlantic rainforest cases of these tree planting projects there, especially by the Brazilian landless movement, which have a pledge to plant 100 million trees. So he's in the audience there, and then we have Sergio Sauer also from the National University of Brasilia, and he has been over to Finland, and I have been over there. So there's been an exchange. But now I will be talking more about the Amazon, which I have looked more, especially two cases there in Santarém, and then in Belém, which are both in the Pará state in the eastern Amazon. So in this photo, you can see it's from the end of last year. That's an area where there used to be a oil palm plantation of 6,000 hectares, which failed. There was like a disease. It's like foreign oil palm plantation, like 2 hours from Belém. And then the Brazilian landless movement got like a settlement there in 2004, and they have been restoring that land. Like there was a lot of ants, and the soil was totally degraded, a lot of poisons being used, and now it looks like that in many parts of the place, or in most part of the area. So it's like agroforestry, a lot of producing a lot of food, and families living there and so on. So actually their current problem is that they don't have enough workforce, so they cannot expand anymore the agroforestry thing. So they have areas that are just naturally regrowing the Amazon back to that area. And here is a map of like that. There are like different kind of areas in the Amazon that should be restored earlier or later. But what you can see is that there's actually those areas that should be most urgently replanted are not being replanted because they are under the hold of the agribusiness. You have soybean plantations, ranches, and so on. And it's a political economic struggle against these kind of planting initiatives. Like there's been like this landless movement, for example, they have been planting trees like hundreds or thousands of hectares in southern Pará. And then the local land boss has come there and burned those plantings to get like a ranch there. So that's kind of like the politically sensitive area. So here you can see a photo where you can see where Santarém and Belém are located in the Amazon. So those are the two sites I first did studies there during the major drought 2 or 3 years ago, and then returned back there last year to see how those areas are faring. So going to the same sites again. And here you can see whole of Brazil. So you can see that the Cerrado area is like less dense forest area, less high dense forest area than the Amazon, but it's very important endemically, and then the Atlantic rainforest there. So here you see a photo of from eastern Brazil, from Bahia state, where there's a lot of degraded pasture area, like in all of Brazil. Like Brazil has like 160 million hectares of pasture area, like ranches, and very lowly used, like one cow per hectare. So you could restore at least 100 million of these back to forestry like easily. Not easily, but you know, they would be available. They're not really used to anything. And then it looks like that. And this is like one rural settlement, like by Brazilian constitution, you have to give the land to the agrarian reform if it's not productive or socially productively used. And then this community, this settlement has been there for 20 years, and this is how it looks now. They were presenting this work in the COP30 meeting in Belém, and this network of peoples. And here you can see then my notes on this extreme drought. So it made restoration very difficult. So we were talking about the mortality rate. So 80 to 95% of the trees died. So quite different from the figures we heard earlier because of the drought. And now it promises that the next year, the end of this year, beginning of next year, will be like same or even worse, like a major El Nino situation. So they actually had to invest in irrigation, very expensive irrigation systems, like you see here, a solar panel and drill to provide irrigation for the first few years, like 4 years, 2, 3, 4 years, so that the plants don't die that you plant. And Here you see a tractor, so they are trying to replace the like Sweden agriculture, like the use of fire with tractor. But then I actually arrived there with the boat that brought like two repair guys there who to repair that tractor. So it's like broken off and it's not big enough to pull down the trees to avoid the use of fire. And then it's in the second time I came there, at the same time there were like people that the current government has provided there like paid fire guards, so kind of fire brigadiers to take care of the fires. So the situation has improved because with the drought, the fires easily escape and it's problematic. So it's like the idea here is it's like a multiple use conservation area, extractive reserve of over 700,000 hectares. There's like a lot of these areas in Brazil, and they are like trying to enrich the forest to get more livelihoods and production and so on. So both of these cases I studied, they are like for people. They are especially for production of food. They are not so much for ecological restoration purposes, but more for agroforestry and food production, so that people could live in the forest and for the forest and so on. So they use nurseries there in that Santarém case. And first they had like hired forestry engineers with a lot of outside money, like 10 of them, and they focused on the production of seedlings, and then they distributed those saplings to the communities, and everybody could take what they want from the river in villages going by boat by the river. But they didn't have any follow-up after that. Like so many people just took them and didn't plant, or they didn't care for them, and so a lot of them died. And after some years of that, then they recognized there's a big problem with that, and now it's much more smaller scale project. Like they have only like about 60 families. They are more engaged. They have to come there. They also come and help with the nursery, and they ask what species do they want, like acai nut trees, some cosmetics trees like kumaru, and then they work more closely with them, and they have like a local technician who is actually from the village, like indigenous person, and lives there and observes everything closely. Not like that you have outsider hired expensive engineers coming in. So this is like one place there. You can see the graviola fruit tree there being planted and so on. And then I'm going to talk about this other case in Belém. So actually Francis knows much more about this. He's studying this Landless Movement 100 Million Trees program. So, but for example, they have this national program of planting trees, producing healthy food. So it's like organic food, and they provided most of the food for the COP30 side event for the People's Summit of Climate Summit. So the food came from that settlement 2 hours from Belém in Santa Barbara. And there they also had nurseries, but these were quite different. Like there was a lot of agency by the local people. They were much more involved. It was autonomous. It was not based on outside funding. And the survival rate was much higher. And they had here bees, like in the other case as well. So bees, pollinators are hugely important for these fruit trees, because otherwise you have to pollinate by hand. But this is like an obstacle in many regions, like that Santarém plateau, like where you have the soybean plantations, because they spread so much agrotoxics that the bees die, and then you have to pollinate by hand. So basically, if you want to reforest the Amazon, you have to first stop with this agribusiness, because it's not compatible with the agrotoxics overuse. It's too much used and so on. So in there, that might explain why these reforestation and agroforestry projects, they mostly take place in these conservation areas or settlement areas, which are like different kind of alternative physical, social, and symbolic spaces in comparison to the Brazilian national context, which is dominated by this agribusiness logic. So here you have the oil palm company, and you can see the oil palm plantation. It's still some there. They are trying to figure out how to make it function there, but they haven't found out. And this is then one of the ways how the landless movement replaces that. So in here, they have first got rid of the palm oil, and then used banana leaves to get some fodder and some like nutrition. And then they plant here papaya to sell like organic papaya, very high quality product and good prices for the locals. And they use this like also with, you can see the irrigation pipes here, like 1 hectare area for 1, 2, 3 years, and then they move to another one and let that area regrow. So that's just one dive, and this is another spot. You have an acai here, which is also very high quality product, high market value. In the Belém city nearby, they can sell it and get a lot of revenue and sustain themselves and so on. So here you have the coordinator on the right-hand side and Filio, and he's looking at one of these burned palm oil trees that they leave there. And here is some of the produce going to the COP summit. And then the housing here, so it's based on a model of like every family getting a plot of a few hectares, like maybe 10 hectares, but then working communally, and they have decent living conditions there for the people who are otherwise landless and so on. So here are some findings that it's really important to focus on these socio-territorial movements. It was striking in the COP30 meeting that there were a lot of promises and money distributed by the Brazilian government to tree planting and reforestation initiatives, especially in this arc of deforestation, which they called arc of reforestation now. It came from the National Brazilian Development Bank, but it came to big corporations. And none of it really, only very little it went to social movements. And they were mostly like not even recognized or talked about these social movements which are doing it. And then I talked to like researchers, specialists from state agencies in Brazil, and they thought that the landless movement initiative shows most promise because it's like autonomous. It's not based on this outside money coming for 1-2 year projects, but it's like funded by themselves. And it changes the agency and it's growing all the time, like they're capacitating people. But yeah, here are some other findings as well. Thank you.
I've been nominated to offer some comments. Thank you for that. I really like that this, that you have the capacity for a comparison across the cases, but also like I know you didn't have a lot of time to like develop the discussion around this, but I find the what you mentioned about the money coming in and then where it's going versus who's on the ground doing the projects and the sorts of challenges they're confronting, like a very interesting, like kind of like multi-scalar story potentially to tell. So yeah, I think situating this in like the tension between kind of like agroecology, agribusiness, and land restitution for landless people is also potentially a very interesting thing to think about. I don't know if you would want to take it that way, but
Well, thank you so much. Nice to see you, everybody. So my name is Marketta Vuola. I'm from the Global Development Studies at the University of Helsinki. And I'm going to briefly give an overview of the Madagascar work package in Trees per Development Program. I'm just quickly, I'm mainly going through our case studies to give the time to the actual research. So, all right, Madagascar has been called like the hottest of the world's biodiversity hotspots because the island has been so long separate from any continents that the endemism is just beyond imagination. The endemism in Madagascar, or the biodiversity, is also extremely threatened, which is why Madagascar has been really the focus of interest of conservation, Western conservation, and now restoration activities for a long time. So we have basically been doing field work in 4 different locations. The first one in the Boeny region in northwestern Madagascar. Not my notes, that's fine. So in Boeny, there's basically 2 protected areas, Antananarivo biocultural site and Antananarivo National Park. The ecosystems are mostly like savanna and mangroves and dry forest. Thank you so much. Yeah. And just to tell you very briefly that the main ethnic group in this area is Sakalava, and there's also a lot of migration, mostly Antananarivo from the south of Madagascar. People are mainly fishers. There's also a lot of subsistence agriculture, commercial crops, cattle, and things like this. Yes. Then we did fieldwork in Ihorombe region in the high plateau. This is an immense grassland where Bara is the dominant ethnic group. The primary livelihood is cattle herding, and the Malagasy cattle, zebu, is basically like the cornerstone of the Bara culture. And there's also, of course, some subsistence cultivation involved. Also in this region, there's a lot of internal migration, mainly from Betsileo ethnic group from Fianarantsoa. On top of these two cases, we have done shorter field visits in the eastern rainforest range. So in Andapa up north, and in Ramamonjisoa National Park in the east. To tell you a little bit about the actors. So in Boeny, as there were two protected areas, restoration has a lot to do with conservation, and there's like a host of many different NGOs and who are doing restoration, a lot overlapping, and a lot. It's a whole network of different kinds of actors, and sometimes a bit difficult to know who is doing what where. Ihorombe, there's not really a protected area, and this is not really ecological restoration at all, even though the company is kind of like arguing that way in many different instances. The actual planting trees is this JFT, the Italian company Tozzi Green's subsidiary. So JFT is the Société GTF Madagascar SARL. Yeah, so the state has leased 11,000 hectares of land to this company. They are mainly planting acacia. And the project has been there for more than a decade, but now recently they have shifted their approach, changing to selling carbon credits. Yes, there has been a very strong opposition, but we'll go to that in the next, some of the next presentations. And just to mention briefly that it was interesting for us to notice that there's a lot of Finnish funding actually, maybe not the most, but surprisingly in all of these 4 cases, the ones marked in blue have Finnish funding involved. For example, in Ihorombe, the Tozzi Green project receives funding from FinFund development. And here's Matthieu's pictures from Boeny region, just to exemplify how many different projects there are ongoing everywhere. For the team, our partner at the University of Antananarivo is Professor Bruno Ramamonjisoa. And the fieldwork was done by, we have master student Sonja Rapo from our university, Matthieu Pierre and Fitiavana, Tanjona and Rindra, project researchers in Madagascar. In Ihorombe, Matthieu and Fitiavana too, but then we had Dr. Jenny Mölkänen and our master student, Matthieu did the fieldwork in Java. I think that's all. Ms. Archipetska.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Hello, everybody. And, thank you very much for inviting me today to share with you some experiences and we have done for the last 15 years. It was not especially for restoration strategy and the restoration landscape, but I adapted what you have done for this because the method will be also fit for restoration landscape So since 2017, Madagascar had implemented a national strategy on forest landscape. And unfortunately, there is implemented some constraint, technical limitation, funding, and mainly all technical and data and methodology are provided by NGO and consulting firms. So we have key gaps with the collaboration with research institutions, the weak of scaling up at rural level, and also low involvement of farmer in pilot restoration initiative. So my presentation wants to explore the use of existing local practices as an entry point of landscape restoration, and to improve the link between decision-making process and field reality, and to address implementation constraint and consider limited farmer involvement in restoration system. So we use a decision-making approach with the assumption that to plant, replant, manage sustainability or feel free to use, largely decision-making process is of rural communities. Even if you have money, if a rural community don't want to do, you can do nothing. So community decision-making based on fact and other factors, such as political, psychological, emotion, for example. But we think that also, and above all, cultural factor is the most important. So our approach is focused on promoting multiple land use to help reduce implementation cost, including farmer commitment, to have an implementation of the strategy effectively. So I will explain you what is the decision-making process. Decision-making process is a complex structured cognitive process in which there is some various decision makers, such as policy makers, but actually, I think because we are thinking about who have the final decision is the farmer, so it will be concentrated in the farmer. So in the complex structured cognitive process, you have a 5-step problem: alternative, implication, choice, and implementation of the solution. So, and it was in the literature, there is something real. And for the decision making, the farmer, because we don't want to focus on the policymaker, but in the farmer have 2 ways. The first way is to have some data, fact, data, to make a rational analysis, which coming from policy brief, result of economic analysis, and so on, but also from some methods, for example, Thales and Legend, comic strip, theater, radiophony, and so on, to have more data to make a decision. And another ways coming from some factor in which we have some constraint, official constraint, because the government have a policy, public policy, implement a law, and it is a constraint for the population to be done. But in this situation, because a great part of population is illiterate, so they don't want to accept law and so on, because some of the documents are not they don't access for the content of the document and in general. So just an example to give you about the cultural factor is about the subconscious of Malagasy in the rural area about the tree and human. So when you see this, you see that the tree and the body have the same name. top, head, the skin, and so on. So because of that, the tradition on forestry use is that the life of human and tree is in conflict. So if you plant a tree, you risk that you will be dead, and your life will be transmitted to the tree. So because of the same part, but it is becoming from the ancestor religion. The tree is the reincarnation of the human, and the rainforest is, or the forest is the reincarnation of a non-human. So if you know something, if you don't know something, you are afraid of these people. So forest is a danger for living people. So you must use the fire, because fire is rejecting the spirit. And sacred forests are the reincarnation of ancestor. So when you see in the forest the existence of flora indicators, such as ficus, for example, you will see that it is something with your your family. So in the tradition, for many years in Madagascar, only the old man must plant tree, because the old man or women have enough enjoy of the life and have to go to the death. So just an example to see what is the importance of a cultural factor in the decision making. But actually, for our presentation, we just want to focus on the valorization of local practices, and this is a multidisciplinary concept with a conceptual foundation, and it can be used for everything: socio-ecological system, common pool resource and institutional analysis, legal pluralism, landscape approach, and so on. I don't want to give you many examples, because my two colleagues will do that also. But I just want to share valorization of local practices with spontaneous reforestation in central western Madagascar, in Akasbe. The innovation is that reforesting not by digging wall, because when you plant tree, somebody asks you to dig a wall, but we don't have to dig a wall, but by ploughing the soil with an old straw plough. And the cloud of air containing the flammable grasses is thus turned over and not longer appears on the plot, so the fire can't go inside the plot. And the young plants are ground on the upper part of the cloud and can't benefit from the cumulative posture. So you'll see in this photo at the left the beginning of the plantation, and actually there is almost about 10 hectares who was planted by the farmer without the support of government and NGO. The second one is about small-scale forestry, in which we see it's if you go in Madagascar, or central Madagascar and Alamak, we'll see that there is a combined production of energy wood and timber. So instead of cutting all for the wood production, they put in place some trees, and for about the possibility to have production of timber for construction wood. Also, we can see in this right photo the pruning tree to produce wood for energy, and we ask the people who is telling them to do that. It's a spontaneous and there is no support from the forestry service. So after having this practice, we want to explain the initiative and their adoption. So we can use the future of innovation from Rogers 2003 about advantage, compatibility, complexity, testability, etc. And with that, we can explain why if one farmer do something and all the people is coming to do the same, because it's a big advantage for all the population. So you have this. I don't have any time for explaining. So the lesson learned about this initiative is that promoting multiple landings can improve cost efficiency and farmer engagement in this, because we don't need extension official. We just have to look local practice, and we see that there is a big benefits from the feasibility, cost, the social acceptance, for example. But the problem is to identify and analyze the local practices. So the influence of local practice on decision-making remains limited. And the key question actually is, what are the spatial and temporal patterns of local restoration initiative, and what factors explain their emergences and persistence? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Amber?
Thank you very much, Bruno. This is a very interesting talk, and I say that for a couple of reasons. So as we know, in Madagascar, there's quite often a project that's begun, and then a process of civilization that happens, and then the outcomes, maybe there's not much follow through, and often like the farmers or the beneficiaries aren't considered to be valid decision makers for a lot of reasons. And I think the fact that you're foregrounding farmers as decision makers is quite radical and very, very important. And that goes along with the second part that I think is really important, which is the recognition of existing practices, that where effective practices exist and we recognize them, then we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we can appreciate and valorize that, and that helps to also give legitimacy to those farmers in relation to their claims for land and territory, and that can help protect them in the long run. So I think
Okay, Assalamualaikum. Hello everyone, and it is my pleasure to come here today to present the research that I have been done with Trees for the project, doing the things that I've been collaborate with them. So my name is Tanjona Odine, and today I'm going to present the negotiating access to plant trees in Madagascar, case studies in Boeny and Ihorombe region. So in Madagascar, various tree planting activities have been proposed to mitigate environmental degradation and reduce pressure on the natural environment, with environmental restoration increasingly being used as strategy to restore degraded land. Through the collaboration with this Trees for Development project, I have been carried out assisted field works focusing on ecological restoration and tree planting activities in Madagascar with master student and researcher from Finland and with researcher from Fianarantsoa, Madagascar. I was doing research assistant by providing translation support and facilitating communication. So this presentation compares tree planting approaches involving citizens' participation and to understand how local communities benefit economically through tree planting activity between the two study case area where the approaches of the project of tree planting are different. So as Marketta have been introduced before, this is the study case. Like we can see, like Boeny is in the southwestern of Madagascar, and Ihorombe is in the south central of Madagascar. And there are some projects who have been doing a kind of project about tree activity in this region, like in Boeny, there is Odine, Bruno, Delk, and Bondi. Then in Ihorombe, there is GTF or Tozy Green, but the most that people have been mentioned in Ihorombe are Tozy Green, and in Boeny region, people are most mentioned all of this project. And then we have been interviewed also like non-governmental project in Boeny, but then in Ihorombe, we didn't have the chance to interview the company because they refused our request. But then lately, when our colleagues came here in Finland, they have been interviewed, the founders from FinFund, but then even that, we didn't get so much answer because they said like they don't know what this is the work of the company. My study case is focusing mainly about those villages like in Boeny region. We have been interviewed people in Barilava, Kasepi, Morafeno, and Aditikal. Then in Ihorombe, we have been conducting our fieldwork in the hamlets, municipalities of Satrukala, Anjulava, and Ambatralahi. So the methods that I have been used during the fieldwork, the research that I have been done is field approach, like going directly to those regions, so I can know directly what is the reality of me or just reading. Then we gave a value about the cultural immersion, including the selective use of local language keywords, like even the greetings, what is the keyword, like people are using in the place just to build the trust between researcher and the participant in the villagers. Then we've been using also interviews by using those semi-structured interview, and there was participant observation and focus group that everyone can have a chance to talk about by their own. Then I would like to show you about these pictures. Like in this one, there is tree for deaf. This is taken by Trees for Deaf colleagues. So we can see like the plateau of Ihorombe is huge. Like it is used for grazing for the cattle, breeding cattle. So there are behind, we can see like it is very green, like it is a line. But those are trees that have been planted by the company, and it is already a tall trees, but the company is mentioned in their website that they have been started their activity on 2023. But when we were in the place, the trees is already tall, so it is also a big question, like when they have been started it. And then in one region, it is in the coast, and the place is like surrounded by the sea. Then now we are going to see what is the differences between these two study case area, like Boeny and Ihorombe region. So let's gonna talk first about the activity about ecological restoration, like in Boeny. There are conservation, restoration, reforestation, and together with the tree planting. Then in Ihorombe, it's only about tree planting. Then about the goal. For Boeny, it is focused about restoration, conservation, like the conservation of the animals and the mangroves. Then in Ihorombe, it's mainly about the commercial, like selling those carbon credit. Then about the impact on the ecosystem services, like in Boeny, people are already have a conscious, like there is already an impact in the places, like they already understand that there is a rainfall and there is increase of animals underwater, and they can benefit from the plant that they have been planted. And in Ihorombe, there is a transformation of pasture into tree plantation enclaves that restricted the land for the grazing. Then about the decision making in Boeny, there is a consultation existing, but it's not enough because there are some people who have been mentioned that there is no consultation to them. But in Ihorombe, it's only selected people like the elders, the people who have power in the villages who have been consulted, and there is a kind of pressure and choice by money. And the pressure is from the existence of those chambers who are present during the meeting. So there is a lack of information in Ihorombe, but there is some participation and understanding in Boeny. And there is about people's reaction, we can see like in Boeny, there is a generally positive. In Ihorombe, there is a resistance. And villagers, people who have cattle, are resisting about tree planting. And the related development activity in Boeny, there is some provision, but in Ihorombe is mainly about infrastructure. Then about the distribution of economic benefits in tree plantation in Boeny, there are some benefits that the community can benefit from the trees that they have been planted, but in Ihorombe, it's mainly for the company who is the owner of the trees, and even people are not allowed to touch them. But there are some people who just explained that there are some agroforestry and nursery distributing, but we didn't see that. Then we can see in this, like, it was in my table that people are not used about the forest in Ihorombe. So the tree plantation is just in the main road of the people. So people are afraid like there is a kind of tahal or bandits inside of the forest that going to attack them. So that is the reason why also people are against of the company about this tree planting activity. It's not only about like differences between these two study case, but there is also the similarities, like the study case recruit peoples from nearby large city instead of employing local communities. There is a strong desire for new project that could provide benefits and opportunities for local communities. Then the tip of the trees that those projects are using are the same because they are using all acacia. To conclude, organizations and companies involved in ecosystem restoration and tree planting initiatives which pursue their own objectives in implementing such projects. The findings in both regions, Boeny and Ihorombe, indicate that the effectiveness and impact of these initiatives are strongly influenced by consultation processes, involvement of local communities in the project, and the provision of tangible benefits to local populations, both in terms of environmental outcomes and improvements to their everyday livelihood. The top-down governance can generate significant challenges in project implementation and may limit the participation of local communities. So the question is like, for long-term project, should local communities be actively involved in project planning, as our commentators have been mentioned also before, and decision-making process, while also being prioritized in the distributions on the benefits generated by these activities? It's for all of us. So thank you so much for your attention, and that is the end of my presentation. Kiitos.
Thank you so much. Amber?
Socio Belaka. I really enjoyed that. I think this is a really good example that illustrates why, stark differences between approaches matter. And this would be true of tree planting or really any sort of environmental intervention in these landscapes. And I thought it was very clear that the different goals and the different techniques and the different consultation styles and how the different projects are interacting with the people who live in these intervention landscapes results in such dramatic differences in outcomes. And this is both like the social outcomes, resistance versus being content or happy with the project. but also, you know, ecological differences. So yeah, like this goes to the question of, tree planting in grasslands, and neglecting the fact that like healthy grasslands are more important to people's livelihoods, to cattle, but also to things like biodiversity than plantations. In a lot of situations, or I would say probably that should be our assumption. But yeah, it was very good, and thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. All right. So we are now ready. Last but certainly not least, we have Matteo also joining us from the Madagascar context. So
Hey, moi, salama. So my name is Matthieu Pierre. So I'm from University of Fianarantsoa, and gratefully had the privilege to work with Trees for Death for this project. So I'll be honored to share with you the study I've been doing with my team, Fitiavana, Helu, and Sonia, and our supervisor who helped us with that, Marketta, Vuola, and Yeni Molkanen. Thank you very much for this help. So I'm going to talk about integrating traditional ecological knowledge into ecological restoration study case in the Boeny region, northwestern Madagascar. Traditional ecological knowledge is defined as a cumulative body of knowledge, practice, and belief, evolving by adaptive process and hand down through generation by cultural transmission about the relationship of living being, including human, with another and with the environment. Successful ecological restoration depend on the cultural and social aspect alongside the effective coordination of science and traditional ecological knowledge. Some studies are documented about knowledge of local people, such as documenting in managing, adapting, and restoring the land on which the livelihood depends, documenting in selecting appropriate site, choosing the right species, and scheduling the planting period while pointing out solution and threat. Traditional ecological knowledge is completely and utterly interconnected with other aspects of indigenous way of being. So why highlighting traditional ecological knowledge in Madagascar? Vast majority of Malagasy population reside in a rural area where they depend on forest for their survival. The blame of forest destruction are placed on rural farmers and their livelihood, justifying border between human and environment, separating the need and which are justifying state coercive governance and policy. The state enclosure the forest as a national space, which result in depossessing locals from the forest and their traditional practice culture. Rural Malagasy continue to have little power to influence forest land policy, control resources, and legal protection. So, however, we notice that prevalence of local traditional knowledge, practice, social norm, traditional belief, and governance in the rural area of Madagascar are still so high. So the goal of this study is to identify the local traditional knowledge, practice, belief, and the rules in use, influencing a restoration project, tree planting, and conservation in Madagascar. So for that, we used a review of existing literature, ethnographic-oriented approach, structured interview with local forest users, traditional institution actors, protected area managers. Also, there was participant observation, including walk in the forest, where there are trees planting or forest burning, meeting with the committee of local institution, informal discussion, focus group with women and men separated. our research question: what are the local practices, knowledges, beliefs, rules and use that are influencing conservation and tree planting? So here are the results. Native forests are considered as a refuge for cultural customs. Why is it like this? So in the picture, we see a king which has a traditional powerful authority, blessing a crystal native tree, which is served by the local community as sacred and place for offering, asking benediction, or for reinforcing the social value and cultures. This tree is called Duani or sacred trees, which is a community spiritual trees and territory with connection to ancestor and God. And this is manifest through ritual offering benediction. Native forest also as a way for local livelihood to influence lives of local people. So for example, they use it for firewood, house construction, agriculture, covering hunting, and medicinal plants. So in this picture, we have 3 pictures of trees which manifest the sacredness and the cultural value of the trees for the local people in the northwestern Madagascar. So the first in my left is with a native tree called mandarin, which has a amulet, Malagasy amulet, to show that the forest belongs to them and then they don't want it to be cut or destroyed by someone. The picture in the middle showed that a native trees inside a mango forest, which is considered sacred and a place for offering or to have a connection between the ancestors and the god. And the picture in my right is a tree used for local people as a dwan also for cultural spirituality with ancestors, God, and also for the custom to be revived or to be live again. So for the ancestral belief and knowledge about land and tree planting. So land is seen as sacred. The Malagasy word for motherland is like ancestors' land or Tanindazan. That means the land belongs to the ancestors. That means traditional customs of blessing the trees planting activities means that before trees planting, so there are always some ceremonies that should be performed by local native or elders in order to bless the activities. Consulting traditional leaders also is important for the planning and then to know the weather requirement and the legitimation of the project. So here we have a local social norm for tree planting and restoration in the study area. So we have a DINA, which is a set of community regulation aimed at ensuring social harmony, mandating collective action, and non-compliance of the DINA requirement result in monetary or sanction in nature. The most serious crime, which is the fire, is subject to the imprisonment by the state. So DINA covered a range of things. So here is the role of DINA in context of conservation and restoration. So DINA is substituting, complementing the national law and conservation program. So the state conservation actor use or influence the DINA of the local community for their interest. The DINA mandated collective action for trees planting. For example, obligation of planting mangrove, 5 mangrove per person. There is also the local participation in management, decision-making, protection, and sanction in relation to the conservation and trees planting. So DINA also helps to protect and readapt local traditional institutions. There are some critiques on the DINA, for example, strong influence of state and conservation actors, too much obligation and restriction inside the DINA, limited participation, especially the gender inequality, and some say that DINA has a little power. So for example, this is a mandatory collective action of doing anti-fire annually by local community through the DINA. So they clear some space in order to avoid the fire to enter in the another area they planted. So here is the DINA committee inside the village, and in the other picture is the DINA assembly for all the local villagers. There is also more than just planting trees for the social cultural dimension. It is being integrated in the community, sharing the same values. For example, the DINA committee said that those who don't plant trees with the Fukunul, which is the local community, means that they don't want to belong to the Fukunul, so they can be expelled. There is also strengthening of local governance, local elders, the king, they possess the knowledge, historical background of the ecosystem, and legitimate actor to influence it. So this, for example, is illustrating an importance of Fitiavana, like social cohesion. When something happens, everybody helps. So this is a bush stock in the river because there was a mud, so everybody helped through it. So what the most important pressure in restoration and tree planting is the fire. So the origin of the fire is so diverse. Some say that it is in search of new and fresh grass for the zebu cattle. So it is done by the livestock breeder. Some say that it is anger, revenge against the park manager who expel or depossess local community for the place they lived, or from the livelihood they always done, or for the grazing they did. And they mentioned Sweden agriculture, which is burning the area before the rainy season. So most of the local farmers do that. Also, there is a fact of burning the tall and thorny bushes for human movement, because when the bushes is so tall, so it's hard to get access. Also, some say to get more money, because local community accuse the NGO conservation for burning some part of the protected area, but the NGO conservation blame the local community for burning it for this purpose. So this is a photo taken by the protected area manager staff. A fire, so the fire always happen in September, October, November, before the rainy season. So let me just introduce you some of the local communities complaint about tree planting in Madagascar. So the project, that means that the protected area manager gives us seeds and seedling only in February, March, and asks us to plant it. It is useless since raining season already gone and few plants survive. We got tired for planting nothing. Another interview says during a informal discussion in a work, there was foreign NGO who just came here and plant mangrove here. This is the result. So he pointed a vast empty land which doesn't have any mangrove. Some said, we local community have gathered and told the project that if they will continue only planting acacia, we will not take part on it. Acacia is harming our soil, taking our water near field cultivation, and destroy our native plants. And the one last but not the least said, a project have paid money only to thousands of people from nearby city to plant mangrove in our place here. They gain money for it, not us. And they ask us to protect it. Maybe if it is like that, we would destroy the mangrove they planted. So we see that some practice of tree planting really harm the project. As conclusion, a forest is more than just trees. It is a living system where community and nature coexist in an economical and socio-cultural dimension. Traditional ecological knowledge helps broadening our understanding on tree planting, not only as ecological aspect, but more interconnected dimension of human-forest relationship. Sudah bisa kah? Kitos.
Don't leave yet. You've got comments. Amber is gonna.
Sorry.
That was a great presentation. Thank you. And, as a political ecologist, I really appreciate that. I think that this is like a very good example of the practical importance of political ecology research around conservation. Because, in a lot of contexts, traditional ecological knowledge can be lost or overlooked. And maybe it is the common assumption that if people don't read or are labeled illiterate, then often implementers will just assume that they don't carry knowledge or don't have any expertise or don't know what they're doing. And I think that, I think looking at, and Bruno as well was looking at existing practices and taking it really seriously, like what people already know, already do, and what's working for them. This is the kind of like the way to get solid sort of baselines that we must have if restoration is going to continue. Knowing, instead of assuming that restoration has to happen because people are ignorant or illiterate or the landscapes are already degraded, actually talking to people about, what they know about the needs of the landscape, the problems they have, what they're already doing and what works very well and why. Regardless of, and also people get dismissed because, like sacred areas and things are sometimes described as, like, oh, this is just irrational. When you're looking at, Folly Forest or something like that, people will say, oh, well, it's just, there's no rules, it's just about the tombs or it's just about the spirits or whatever. But no, like these are integrated like systems. They make sense on the ground. And yeah, it's just very important to acknowledge this and to understand, like how people's practices and knowledges are situated historically, but also like can lead them to the way they think about the future and their prospects for development and their aspirations. So, I think it's great. I love that you touched on Dina, that you talked about fire. It's very rich. So yeah, thank you very much.